Hello everyone and welcome to a tutorial video where we will showcase the basics of how AppGyver Composer works by building a to-do app. So here in the browser window I have a fresh app I've just created. We've got the component library here that I can use to drag and drop new UI components. We've got the app canvas which defines our user interface, and we'll go through the rest of the stuff soon. But first we want to have our app running on an actual device. So here on the right, this is streaming from my iPhone on my desk. We can find the AppGyver app in the App Store. I already got it installed, so I simply click open and I'm taken to my app listing since I'm already logged in. Let's open the To-Dos app. We can see how our app user interface will look in real time. So this is all rendered by our React Native based runtime. So even though we have a HTML representation here, this is what you see, it's native application running. So if I make a change here and save, it updates in real time here. So let's get to work building our user interface. So we'll have to-dos here, and then we'll add in an input field. And now we want to configure our properties for this. So we can see that the label text here is linked to the property here. So if I change this to, let's say, new to-do label, we can see it updates here. And when I click save, UI also updates in the application here. And this is a fully functional component, so I can write here just as I would in a natively built app. So next, we also have some other configuration options here, like the placeholder text. Let's make the input field auto-capitalize our new to-do items, and we'll get to the rest of these different properties in upcoming videos. So now to build the rest of our UI, we'll have a button, and then to add a new item, and then we'll have a checkbox list item that will then be our to-do item essentially. So now we've got our full UI, and we can see here that we've got auto capitalization on, and checkbox also works as I tap it. So now we want to store our to-dos in a client-side data resource, which means that it's a set of data, items, records that are stored just on this device running the application, not in any backend, which makes it useful for many real-life examples and very good for prototyping. In this case, I open the data tab from the global toolbar and add a data resource for client-side storage. And let's call it to-do item, to-do items, and we'll have the properties label done, which is a Boolean type, and then we'll have created at, and this type will be date time. And now we can also add human readable names for these, and we're not going to bother with the description, but in many places in Composer you can define both the kind of code level key and also the human readable title, so it's good to get into the habit of that. So whenever you use your data resources or components you create, they are nicely laid out. So now we can go to the Variables tab. Variables, which are defined on this page, are essentially ways to store data during your application runtime. They can be anything from a list of to-do items coming in from a data source, like we'll define here by adding a to-do item data variable. So since this resource data is type all, we get all the to-do items in our client-side storage, and then they are saved in memory in this variable. We also have page variables, which exist in the context of a single page, and app variables, which are global variables for the whole app. So we'll actually, in addition to this, we go and create a new page variable called new to-do label. So we want to have access to whatever is written here, and we'll want to store it through a variable. So now we've got the variables that we want, and what we can do is we can make this to-do item repeat itself based on the to-do items data variable, and then here we can bind this component's value field to the to-do label. So now If we remove the preview text, we can see that it's bound to this variable. So now whenever I type something here, it automatically gets set to the variable. So if I, for example, set this bound this label also to that, we can see how these two components are linked through the variable. So if I go here and type something here, we can see the two-way binding happen. So let's go back to a static string for this binding. So this is gonna be to-dos still, and now we don't see any data here because we don't have any records in the client-side storage yet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some logic to the add to-do button. So we do that by selecting this and clicking the add logic button. So here we have our logic canvas where we have events that trigger additional logic flows. So everything starts here in the context of this button with the component tap event. So whenever the component is tapped, we trigger whatever flow is here. So now what we can do is we can select from this logic library. Again, these are just a few of the samples. You can find more in the flow function market. We'll add the create record flow function. So now we want to add a few fields to this. So based on our schema, we have this user interface here that asks us to fill in what properties to the created to-do item we want to assign. So here we'll bind the label to the page variable value, the new to-do label. So now whatever is written in this field gets sent to this label property of the created item, and then we'll use formulas to generate the unique ID here. So by calling the generate UID formula, we are able to add a unique ID for this to-do item, and then the done will be false, and then we'll add a timestamp with the now formula. So whenever this gets created, these formulas are run and evaluated to be generated unique ID or the current date stamp of whatever the time is at the moment of creation. So now the final thing to do is we want to go here and bind the label here to the label of the currently repeated item. So now after saving, what we can see is that I can basically click the item, type in my to-do item that I want to add by paperclips to go with the MacGyver theme. And when I click add to do, here we go. If we go to the variables tab and the to do item data canvas, we can see that data variables have additional logic that determines how they get populated. So we have the get record collection node, which fetches the data from the client side storage, and then the set data variable node, which actually sets it to the variable we see repeated here, and then there's a delay node loop. So now for example's sake, we'll set this to 100 milliseconds, but we could also react to an event, but let's not do that now. So next up, we can save the app and switch back to the view canvas and look to the right. So now we can see that it got refreshed and we still see our data from the storage. So let's just add a new to-do item, something again MacGyvery, and we can see that it appears almost immediately. So now the issue is that first of all that our to-do items are being created in the done state, and now it's not being saved. So if I do something here to trigger the save, we can see that these to-do items come back in the wrong states. So the first thing to do is that we want to bind the value to the done property of the to-do item, and then so now they get initialized correctly as empty. But then we want to react to the checkbox on change event and use the update record flow to update that to-do item. So then we'll add the ID field to be the current repeated item. So also in the context of logic, we have access to the repeated item. So then we select that we want to set done, and we want to set it to the output value of another node, and we choose the onChange event. So all of the nodes in a logic flow, some of them have output arguments. So in this case, this event also outputs the Boolean state of the checkbox after it has been checked. and for example the update record would output the updated record and so on. So this output of value of another node allows me to reference data from previous nodes in the flow. So now we have bindings complete. So now if I check an item here and go back and open the app again, it's correctly checked. So now we have a basic example app, and then just as a nice addition, let's add a few more formulas to the mix. So instead of showing just the label, we'll want to also show the created at date of the element. So here we can go and change this to a formula type. So we have the current.label, and then we can add here a bit of additional characters to the string. So then here we'll use the format datetime local to format our current.createdAt, and you can see that we get autofill suggestions, and this format is in the moment.js format. So we'll have like this. So now when we save, we also see the timestamp after this item formatted to a nice string. So the formulas really allow you to keep your data in as good format as you like and then work from there. So then the final thing would be that we would like to order our list so that the newest ones are at the top. So if I add something here, it goes to a random place in the list at the moment. So we'll want to sort this list. So again, I can change this binding to a formula and use the sort by key formula, where I add first parameter is the array to sort, and then the second is the key to sort by, and then we'll want to reverse this. So now when I save, we get our to-dos in the correct order from the newest to the oldest. So any data binding can be bound to a formula, and whenever any of the constituents of the formula change. So again, when I add a new to-do here, what happens is that this gets triggered, which then causes a new record to appear in the data store, and then our loop here triggers the fresh data, which is then set here to the to-do item data variable, which then gets shown here, and that triggers the running of this formula. That's a brief introduction. I hope you enjoyed this dive into how Composer works, and let's go from there.